I would be open to questions and on this or on Latin America, on Mexico, whatever you want to ask.
My name is Ahmed. I'm from Egypt. That was such a nice speech and presentation. I just wanted to ask one thing. I think one of the reasons, and correct me please if I'm wrong, that the new wall that's being erected between the U.S. and Mexico border, on the U.S. and Mexico borders, is because of the American president thinks the Mexicans are going there to steal their jobs, their educations, and do things that Americans won't be able to do anymore. How can you convey to the American government or the cabinet that the Mexicans are not there to do what they want, what they think they want to do, and they're only there to look for better opportunities of life where they can't find it in their own?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I think, and I wanted to provide this speech to you just to let you know that this war between the U.S. and Mexico is not new. It's something that it's been going for decades. No new border has been built since President Trump is in power. There has been a lot of speeches around it, a lot of narrative around it, but no physical wall has actually been built. Nevertheless, I think also we need to be better in the U.S., people that actually do not agree with the wall and agree with integration with Mexico and have been benefited by the integration with Mexico, we need to be better to explain the benefits of that integration. We're either the first or the second trading partner for more than half of the states of the United States. We are providers of manufacturers. We're provided of cheap stuff that goes from Mexico to the United States. We have more than 1 million trucks crossing every day with merchandise from Mexico to the United States. So that means that we have the possibility of being more effective to let them know about the great benefits, not for Mexico, but the great benefits for the U.S. society for that integration. And the other part is that nowadays, and maybe there's very few people that know that, Mexico and the U.S. have a zero migration rate. It's not Mexicans going to the U.S. anymore massively. It's more these caravans going from Central America, basically crossing through Mexico and not wanting to stay in Mexico. They're wanting to rejoin their relatives or going to work to the US. So we need to work together in a partnership in order to be able to develop Central America. Just one specific that I worked while I was Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. When you cross the border from Mexico to Guatemala, energy costs raise 300%. If we are able to take natural gas, which is just by the border in Mexico, and be able to construct something to take a pipeline, obviously, to take natural gas to Central America, we would be changing, like this, the energy matrix and thus the development matrix in Central America. Those are the kind of things and those are the kind of projects we need to focus on.
Please.
First of all, thank you so much.
Wait a second.
They forgot, but I didn't.
It's fine. I think it's a bit short. Oh, no, it's not. First of all, thank you so much for this speech. I think it was really wonderful, very personal. So thanks a lot. I think everyone was listening very closely to what you said. So what I was interested in, I think we heard a lot about the Mexican wall from an American perspective, what is thought about this from a political perspective, but we never hear anything from the Mexican perspective. And considering that you are a senator in the Mexican Congress, what are the debates, what are the things that have been saying and that are important at this stage from a Mexican perspective? So that's my question. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes, and I'll have to be very honest about this too. There is like a nationalist sentiment everywhere in Mexico about the wall. If people in Mexico would listen to the speech I just gave, maybe for some of them would be something new to listen that the wall has been built for decades before, and it's not something new. It's not something about the new administration in the U.S. They would also be shocked by the fact that no new wall has been built lately in the last 3 years. And sometimes also, so while that unites us in a very nationalistic sentiment about not having the wall, and that being something retrograde, and that being something that is quite aggressive if we are partners, if we are free trade agreement partners. At the same time, the ones that leave the border on a daily basis is the northern parts of Mexico. It's a huge country. So that is not the reality, the everyday reality for center Mexico or southeast Mexico. They have other more overwhelming problems, especially development problems, and in the last months, security problems in focal areas in Mexico. So while I think that there is a sentiment that unites us nationally for not wanting the wall and not wanting a new wall, there will be very few that know that that wall has been existing for decades. There will be very few to know that that wall hasn't been rebuilt or another wall has been rebuilt lately. And not all of Mexico lives that on a daily basis. But still is something that whenever that comes up in a Twitter or whenever that comes up in a discourse, it organizes Mexico with this national sentiment. That, by the way, I think it's very scary to wake up those nationalistic sentiments, especially when it's against another country. And it's something that it's lying there, and you don't want to enhance and you don't want to wake up, because, again, as I said, then we're living again in a world of extremes, where it's either you like the wall or you don't like the wall. It's not thinking about how to create development in certain parts of Mexico. It's either, are you against the United States wanting to build a wall, or are you in favor of poor Mexicans that are being renegated by their neighbors?
Okay, thank you. Any other question?
I mean, we purposely have plenty of time for questions, so don't hesitate. We want to make the most of this opportunity, so don't be shy. Please.
Okay. Thank you so much. My name is Susana Martinez. I'm from the ICT, and I would like just briefly ask you about your perception regarding what happened last Monday in Mexico. And how do you actually perceive the help from the president from the US against with the narco traffic that, you really could know. So do you think that Mexico should get that help, considering and knowing that the people in the US, they can get so easily guns and everything, and they are used to go to Mexico and transport those arms? Thank you.
No, thank you for your question. Very relevant. Mexico has been living in the last decade a very tough situation in terms of security. It's not something that is generalized in the whole of the country, but rather focalized in specific locations in Mexico. The previous governments have decided to confront these criminal organizations with all the power of the state, including state police, municipal police, and even the army and the navy. So that had been the case. In the current government, which has been there for almost a year, as you know, it's a new leftish government for the first time in Mexico. They have decided to follow a policy, as they call it, hugs, not shots, abrazos, no balazos. So what it's been contested now is how effective that policy is. Obviously, we need to develop Mexico. Obviously, you need to give opportunities. Obviously, you need to improve education. But that will not happen from one day to the other. And at the same time, you need to face the emergency in some states of security and drug cartels giving a fight for the territory in some spaces. So what happened, for those of you that might not know, is that we have had two junctures of drug cartels facing the state in one case, a harsh combat between the forces of the state and the cartels 2 weeks ago. And this last Monday, there was a whole family that was killed in one of the northern states. Basically, it seems that is related to a drug cartel, but we don't have the final information yet. But what that is showing is that I think they really need to rethink about a new strategy against the drug lords and against criminal activities, and a strategy for peace and to combat violence. I think we in the Congress have given what they have asked us. They asked us for a National Guard. We built a National Guard. We discussed the National Guard. The National Guard is now working, but the National Guard should not be should not be the same as the national strategy for peace. So we need a national strategy for peace, a thoughtful one, a very complex one, a very integrated one that actually gives results in the short, medium, and long term. It's such an overwhelming issue for every Mexican that we cannot wait anymore. So it's not something that we can see in the coming 10 years, an improvement. We need to see an improvement tomorrow and the day after, because we're talking about lives of Mexicans. And the help by the U.S., I think, in terms of intelligence, in terms of exchanging information, in terms of cooperation, I think it's the usual cooperation that we have had, and it's been very useful and it's been very targeted. But that's completely different than some papers said about either an intervention or troops from the U.S. going to Mexican territory. I think that's out of the question. I think we should be able to solve out a single effective strategy, and then of course get all the information and experience sharing and intelligence from the U.S. and from any other country or organization in the world.
Any question? Any other question, please? The final one.
Hello, David, a student here. And so before you mentioned less marginalization and more centralization, so bringing the two communities together. Do you have maybe one idea or a strategy to do that? Might be, I don't know, from cultural exchange to language exchange. I mean, the two communities, the US and Mexico, know each other already quite well, but still it doesn't seem to be working that well. So do you have any ideas or suggestions for future strategies when it comes to understanding each other? Thank you.
Yes, definitely. And it's just not understanding each other, because I'm more of a pragmatic. Sometimes I'm an idealist like everybody else, but I think we need to do concrete things. So it's just not sitting around and saying, well, let's get to know each other better, no? And how do you feel and how do I feel? It's more a question of doing things together, and what kind of things we should do together. Development projects for the center and southeast of Mexico, and development projects for Central America. We have been having projects for also many decades. It was during the Bush administration. I used to work at the Ministry of Finance, and there was this program called Partnership for Prosperity, P4P. And that had a very robust strategy on energy, on infrastructure, on trade. So those are the kind of things that we need to revamp, update them, and start working. What I thought about those when they asked me why didn't they work as they should, I have a couple of answers. One of them, I think they were too big. They wanted to touch upon everything. We should focus, as I said, okay, if it's energy, let's focus on energy first. And let's focus on energy in Mexico, and let's focus on energy in Central America. If it's capacity building, okay, then the second project will be capacity building. But I went to those meetings. We were ministers of finance, deputy ministers of finance, ministers of energy. There were large meetings. We saw 10 different project agenda. I think we should be focusing on one or two projects. And once we're able to do that and to see that as a reality, that could work a lot. In specific, in the part of the south part of the border between Mexico and Central America, there is a lot of infrastructure that needs updating. When you go to the border between Mexico and the United States, it's first class, X-rays and whatever, technological novelty there might be. But in our border with Guatemala, for example, we have 8 crossings. 2 of them are quite state-of-the-art. The worst crossing, and I was there when I was Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, it's from the Mexican side, is like a 1970s construction, good with every single authority there, migration and sanity and customs. So it's sort of there. In the part of Guatemala, there is a home, a 3-story home. In the first two floors, there's 2 families, and in the 3rd floor, it's the Migration Authority of Guatemala. And when I wanted to call them, I called the family and they said, okay, let me just call the authority and he'll be here in 2 minutes, no? So that's one of the crossings we have. So one of the major projects between Mexico and Guatemala we need to focus is on updating our border infrastructure. I mean, we cannot have that kind of border infrastructure in the 21st century. And if the United States also has stakes on that migration, maybe we can work out on, updating that in particular border crossing between Guatemala and Mexico with money from Mexico, from Central America, from the US, from Canada that is also willing to help, from Nordic countries that have also said that they're willing to help. So I just think that we need to focus on specific projects. Infrastructure and energy would be my choices.
Okay. Let me thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.